Give me your bank passwords, or don't bother coming back. That's what my daughter said to me, not in a whisper, not in anger, calm, flat, like she was asking for the time. And then, before I could even decide how to feel about it, she opened the front door and shoved me out into the cold. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. I'm 72 years old. My name is Elowyn Virel. And that night, I stood barefoot on a frozen porch, while the door slammed behind me, like I was nothing more than a draft she wanted to keep out. Have you ever heard silence that loud? Because that's what it was. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until your own breathing sounds chouge to you. My fingers went numb almost instantly. The wood beneath my feet felt like ice. Inside, I could still hear them, plates clinking, chairs shifting, life continuing, as if I had already disappeared. Now here's the part that matters, the part you're probably wondering about. Why didn't I knock? Why didn't I beg? Why didn't I scream her name? Because I already knew this was coming. You don't wake up one day and get thrown out by your own child over money. No, this kind of moment builds, quietly, slowly, like cracks in glass you don't notice, until the whole thing shatters. And Maris, my daughter, she had been building toward this for months. Still, standing there, feeling the cold creep into my bones, I realized something strange. I wasn't surprised. I was ready. I slipped my hand into my sleeve and pulled out my old phone. Not the one she knew about, the one I kept hidden, the one she never thought to look for. My hands were steady. That's the part people don't expect when they hear this story. I dialed one number, just one. It rang once, twice. Then a voice answered. I didn't explain. I didn't panic. I simply said, "It's time." And then I lowered the phone and waited, because what was about to happen next, Maris never saw coming. You know what's strange? Betrayal rarely starts with shouting. It starts with help. That's how it began with Maris. 6 months before she shoved me out onto that porch, she stood in my kitchen with a concerned look on her face and said, "You shouldn't be living alone anymore." Her voice was soft, persuasive, loving even, and for a while I believed that was exactly what it was. I had just sold my house, not because I wanted to, but because the stairs were getting harder on my knees, and the repairs kept piling up faster than I could keep up with them. Maris told me moving in with her would be temporary, practical, sensible. She said I'd have my own room, my own privacy, my own routine. She said, "Let me take care of you for once." That sentence. It sounds so tender, doesn't it? And maybe part of me wanted to hear it. Maybe part of me wanted to believe my daughter still saw me as her mother, not as an inconvenience with a bank account. At first everything looked normal. Her house was immaculate, almost too immaculate. Nothing was ever out of place, not a cushion, not a fork, not a thought, it seemed, that didn't serve a purpose. Maris had always been like that, sharp, composed, the kind of woman who smiled with her mouth, but measured with her eyes. She had a husband, Sorrel Dane, 41, quiet and tired-looking, and a teenage son, Tavian Dane, 16, who barely looked up from his phone but always mumbled hello to me. We had family dinners. We watched television in the evenings. To anyone looking in from the outside, it probably seemed ideal. But little things started shifting almost immediately. Maris began asking questions that didn't sound strange on their own. "What bank are you using now? Do you still get paper statements? Have you updated your beneficiaries? She always wrapped it in concern. I'm just trying to help, Mum. These things get confusing at your age. You need someone organized. At first I answered lightly, then more cautiously. Then I noticed she kept circling back. She wanted to know where I kept important papers. She wanted copies of documents I hadn't offered. She suggested combining accounts to make things easier. She asked whether I'd considered adding her name to anything in case of an emergency. Emergency, that word started appearing a lot. What made it worse was how polished she was about it. In front of friends, she played the devoted daughter perfectly. She posted pictures of us having tea. She captioned them with things like, "So grateful to care for family." People praised her. "You're an angel. Your mum is lucky to have you." Lucky. I almost laughed the first time I read that. Then came the first moment that made the hair on the back of my neck rise. I walked into the study one afternoon and found Maris holding one of my unopened bank envelopes. She didn't jump, didn't apologize. She just looked at me and said, I was going to help you sort your mail." Help. Again. I took the envelope from her hand and said, "I can still open my own letters." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course you can." That night at dinner, she was overly sweet, too sweet, asking if I wanted extra tea, telling Tavian to be nicer to Grandma, resting a hand on my shoulder just a second too long, and that was when I knew. She wasn't frustrated, she was adjusting, testing how far she could go before I pushed back. A few days later, she stopped pretending and asked me directly for my banking passwords. Not help with a bill, not access in case of emergency. My passwords. I looked at her across the kitchen counter and said one word, "No." She went very still after that. No yelling. No slammed cupboards. Just a long, cold silence while she studied my face like she was seeing a problem she hadn't planned for. Then she leaned in slightly and said, very quietly, "You're going to regret making this difficult." The next morning, something felt wrong before I even opened my eyes. You ever get that feeling like the air itself has shifted? I sat up slowly. My room looked the same at first glance. Bed made, curtains drawn halfway, the faint smell of lavender cleaner Maris insisted on using. But then the details started to surface. My dresser drawers weren't how I left them. I opened the top one. My documents folder. Gone. Not misplaced. Gone. Now let me ask you something. If you woke up in someone else's house and your personal papers had disappeared overnight, what would you do? Panic. Confront them. I didn't. I stood there for a moment, letting the realization settle into place. This wasn't a mistake. This was a move. So I went looking. Maris was already in the kitchen, dressed neatly as always, scrolling through her tablet like nothing had happened. Coffee steaming beside her, calm, controlled. "Morning," she said without looking up. I watched her for a second longer than usual. "Where are my documents?" No hesitation. "Safe, safe." Funny word, isn't it? It can mean protected, or it can mean taken. "I didn't ask you to move them," I said. She finally looked at me then, no smile this time. "You didn't need to. I found inconsistencies in your accounts. It's better if I handle things before something goes wrong." Before something goes wrong. That phrase again. Always wrapped in concern. Always hiding something sharper underneath. I felt it then. The shift. Not subtle anymore. Not careful. She had crossed a line and she knew it. "What exactly are you handling, Maris?" I asked. She turned the tablet toward me. Documents, forms, legal language, power of attorney drafts, my name on them, her name beneath. "I'm preparing for the inevitable," she said calmly. "You're not as sharp as you used to be. This protects both of us." There it was, out in the open, not help, control. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, but my voice didn't shake. "I'm not signing anything." She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She simply nodded once, like she had expected that answer and already planned for it. That was the moment I understood something critical. This wasn't about convincing me anymore. She was moving forward, with or without my consent. So I changed my approach. I stopped resisting out loud, and I started paying attention. Over the next few days I watched everything, not obviously, quietly. I noted when she made calls, when she left the house, when certain papers appeared and disappeared. I wrote things down when I was alone, times, dates, exact phrases she used. And one afternoon, I left. I told her I was going for a walk. Instead, I went somewhere very specific. A small office, quiet, private. I sat across from a man who didn't smile much and handed him everything I had been keeping track of. He didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, he simply said, "You did the right thing coming early." Early. That word mattered. Before I left, he gave me something, a sealed envelope. Instructions I followed exactly, and one more thing, a number to call. "Only when you're ready," he said. I fast forward to that dinner. The table was full, plates, voices, tension hiding just beneath the surface. And then Maris decided it was time. She set her fork down, looked directly at me and said, "Tell everyone your bank passwords. Let's not pretend any more." The room went silent. Sorrel looked confused. Tavian froze mid-bite. And me? I just looked back at her and said, "No, again." That's when everything snapped. Not with yelling, with action. She stood, walked around the table, grabbed my arm, and pulled me up like I weighed nothing. "Then you can leave," she said. And before anyone could react, she shoved me out the front door, into the freezing night, locked it behind me. Inside, I heard someone ask, "Was that necessary?" And Maris answered, uncalm as ever, "She'll come back when she's ready to cooperate." I stood there, in the cold, and realized she had no idea what she'd just done. Cold has a way of sharpening your thoughts. Standing there on that porch, barefoot, the wood biting into my skin, I felt everything slow down. Not panic, not fear, just clarity, because this was the moment everything had been leading to. I didn't knock. I didn't call her name. Instead, I reached into my sleeve, pulled out that small phone, and made the call you already know about. "It's time." That's all I said. And then I waited. Now here's what you need to understand. Waiting is powerful when you know something the other person doesn't. Inside the house, I could still hear them. Muffled voices through the door. Chairs scraping. That uneasy shift people make when something feels wrong, but no one wants to say it out loud. Maris, though, she carried on. Of course she did. In her mind, this was already over. I was outside. I was cold. I would come back. I would give in. That's how she saw me. Predictable, manageable, but minutes passed. 5, 10, 15, and I didn't knock. Inside, the energy began to change. I could hear it even through the wood. Questions now, lower voices, someone pacing. Sorrel, most likely. He never liked conflict, not really. By the 20-minute mark, even Maris started to feel it. I imagined her glancing at the door, just once at first, then again, that small crease forming between her brows when something doesn't go according to plan. And because here's the thing about control, it only works when the other person follows the script. And I wasn't following anything anymore. At exactly 30 minutes, headlights cut through the darkness. A car pulled up in front of the house, not fast, not loud, deliberate. I didn't move, I didn't react. I just watched as the light washed over the windows, turning them into mirrors for a brief second. Inside, everything went quiet. Then came the knock, firm, precise, not the kind of knock you ignore. Footsteps approached the door. I could almost map them in my head. Maris reached it first. Of course she did. She opened the door with that same controlled expression she always wore when dealing with problems. And then it broke. I didn't see her face directly from where I stood, but I didn't need to. I heard the silence that followed, heavy, sudden, total, then a voice, unfamiliar, professional. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you." Not a question, a statement. Inside, something shifted instantly. A chair scraped back too fast. Someone gasped, and then someone started crying. Soft at first, then louder. Tavian. I recognized it immediately. That sound, it didn't belong in Maris's perfectly controlled world, and that's when I knew. The moment had arrived. Maris's voice came next, but it wasn't the same voice anymore. The sharpness was gone. The certainty had cracked. "What is this?" she asked. No one answered her right away, because some answers don't come in words, they come in consequences. I stayed where I was. The cold, no longer the thing that mattered, as the door remained open, and everything inside that house began to unravel. The man at the door didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Ma'am," he repeated, holding up a badge this time. "We're with financial crimes. We have reason to believe there's been an attempt to unlawfully obtain control over someone's assets." Silence followed, the kind that stretches just long enough for reality to settle in. And then Maris laughed, actually laughed. A short, sharp sound, disbelief. "There's been some kind of mistake." There wasn't. I stepped forward then, finally crossing the threshold she had thrown me out of just 30 minutes earlier. No one stopped me this time. No one told me to leave. The warmth hit my skin, but I barely noticed it. All eyes were on me now. "Hello, Maris," I said. She turned slowly, and for the first time that night, she looked unsure, not angry, not controlled, uncertain. "You called them?" she asked. I nodded once, and that was when everything unraveled. The investigators moved with quiet efficiency. They asked her questions, specific ones, about documents, about account access attempts, about drafted legal authority she had no right to initiate. At first she tried to explain it away. I was helping her. She's been confused. I was protecting her, but then they opened the folder, the one I had prepared weeks ago, recorded conversations, dates, copies of altered paperwork, evidence of her trying to access accounts without my consent. Every layer she thought was hidden wasn't. Sorrel didn't say a word. He just stood there, staring at the table like it might give him an answer. Tavian had stopped crying, but his face, he wouldn't even look at his mother anymore. And Maris, she kept talking, but no one was listening, because the story had already changed. Within the hour, they informed her she was under formal investigation for attempted financial exploitation. Not arrested that night, but not free from consequences either. And consequences came quickly. Her workplace was notified within days. A temporary suspension turned into something permanent. Friends stopped calling. Messages went unanswered. The same people who once praised her devotion began to distance themselves quietly. The house, under review, partially funded by my money as it turned out, something she hadn't expected me to prove. Legal protections were put in place around my accounts. Independent oversight. No shared access. No loopholes. And me, I didn't stay, not another night. I moved into a smaller place a few weeks later. Quiet. Warm. Mine. No one going through my drawers. No one asking for passwords. Wrapped in concern. Just silence. The kind that doesn't press on your ears. The kind that lets you breathe. The last time I saw Maris was across a table in a room filled with paperwork and consequences. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, just diminished. "You didn't have to do this," she said. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I answered simply, "Yes, I did." Because when she told me to leave that night, she thought I had nowhere to go. But the truth was, I had already made sure I did.